Hello, so I want to go over a few things from this week's lecture based off the slides. Just point out a few important things. So we talk about hazards and risk and kind of made mention of this at the beginning of the course. So a hazard is a condition that could cause a loss. The important part of hazards is observing them and understanding what a hazard could be in the future. A lot of these are based on experience and training. So hazard recognition, experience, what are the hazards? Sometimes what will happen if folks have not experienced certain conditions, they won't recognize it as a hazard. And this is where training comes into play and academics as well, because both aspects we talk about things that you might have not been aware of unless you experienced them yourself in a similar situation. Hazards can catch us off guard, especially if we're not familiar with the situation. For example, helicopters landing and taking off in the area and issues with them. So we have to be familiar with not only our own operations in a fixed wing aircraft, but also other operations that may be going or ongoing around us in an airport. One of the things that we use to understand experiences and what are dangerous areas is simulation. We use simulation in training because in simulation we can provide various scenarios that people might not see on a day-to-day basis. Other methods that we can use for hazard awareness, obviously regulations, advisor circulars, wings programs, safety seminars given by AOPA and other folks, the FAA, are ways for us to raise our awareness of hazards. So what's a risk? A risk is the likelihood or severity that a hazard could have in a potential future situation. Normally, risk will deal with two things: exposure and severity, and probability. Here's a typical severity probability matrix. So what we're trying to do is drive things in the upper right-hand corner of unacceptable into the acceptable category. I made mention that depending on what you're flying and who you're flying with, your margin of risk will be different. For airline transport category aircraft, it's always going to be, for the most part, in the green. You might have some yellow if you're flying for law enforcement, oil rigs, or bush airplanes, emergency medevacs. Those types of things sometimes will operate in the yellow area because of their mission. And the military also falls into that category. So we have really three areas of risk: unacceptable, acceptable, and residual risk. And residual risk is acceptable risk plus unidentified risk. So unidentified risk, there's always some risk that we probably didn't account for. We can't think of every possible scenario. So we accept risk, and then we have some identified risk that is obviously part of that accepted risk. How do we manage this? We control, we transfer, and we try to avoid risk. So I think that's it. That's all I wanted to talk about here to point out. So take a look at these slides and make sure you understand the importance of hazards and risk and how to manage risk. Thank you.